Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Dutch sprint coach Henk Kraaijenhof. And in our talk, guys, Henk's going to talk about athlete profiling. We're going to get into what his favorite ideas are when it comes to training athletes to start out with, and then get into three things that he looks at when he's creating these athletes' profiles and why he feels they are so important. We then are going to start talking about why Henk thinks that fiber typing is important and why people need to understand why that it is important. Then we get into the importance of understanding the style of learning that best suits your athletes, because so much of what we do is cueing and teaching. Henk brings up some really great points and even talks about some different ways you can do it. Then he gets into what he thinks the future of training is actually going to hold for us, what we're going to end out looking into more and doing more with athletes as time goes on. And one of those things he talks about is genetic testing and where this fits in with how he's profiling athletes now. It's really, every talk with Henk is fascinating, and this is no exception. It's an awesome talk. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Let's get right to it. Henk, thanks for being on today, man.
Okay.
It's so we had a pretty interesting talk where you came up with this awesome idea from reading a couple books about some pretty neat questions. The first of which, I actually am really excited to hear this answer. So what is your favorite idea in sports training?
Okay. Yes, let me go back to the first thing that you came these questions. I read those books and read the question, but I was more interested in the answer. And you see a lot of variation in answers. It kind of opens your mind. If you have to limit yourself to one idea, you have to pick out the most important, and that kind of narrows you down to the important things that you have in sports training as well. The most important thing in idea in sports training is, yeah, good. I didn't think about those ever answering those questions myself, I must admit. I think it was an American doctor more than a century ago, I think William Oslo, who said, if we have a patient, I don't look at the disease, I look at the patient. And I think one of the most important ideas in sports training is don't look at the training or your system or your program, look at the athlete. And that's a common fact. We keep on tinkering on better programs without really looking or ignoring that individual that you are applying this program to. So, like I say, I think it's very important to profile your athlete or your team on as many factors as you can. And then make a program, and not make a program apply to everybody whatsoever, and then hope something good will come out. So it's in the relationship between athlete and the program. I try to focus on the athlete and not on the program. The program is something that comes after knowing what athlete you have. So I think this is for me, this is the most important issue in sports training, and that's often kind of pushed away or neglected or yeah.
No, that's awesome. So then, if we look at building this profile,
yeah.
What are your favorite ways to do that? How do you prefer to do that with both, as you've come through, like how has that changed, and what have you done that you've been like, wow, that's a really great idea, and what are some things that you've done that you've been like, maybe I shouldn't do that one anymore?
If you talk about profiling, right?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the first things it was just coming not from science or from reading, just from sheer experience as a coach. So you ask yourself, how come we have two athletes and of the same level, and the one always performs very well at the big ones, and the other one just cracks under pressure? Where is this coming from? There's a difference. They always do well in training, show you the most beautiful performances in training or in low-level competition. Then comes the big one, and they really have to perform, and one cracks under pressure, and the other ones is just blooming under this pressure and say, hey, this is my type of competition. Where does it come from? So number one is, and that's probably not the first one I look at, but is how do they handle pressure? So you get people who handle it very well and people who don't handle it very well. The second one is probably more relevant and comes first in the line of profiling, is a muscle fiber type. Are you a fast twitch type or a slow twitch type? Are you more explosive sports oriented or endurance sports oriented? Or are you, in many cases, a mixture between, say, 50-50 explosive endurance oriented, which is comes in very handy in many sports, like in team sports. You need to be explosive, you need to be fast, but you also need to last for for as long as the competition takes. That's number two. Number three is how do you learn? How do you learn as a person? Are you a quick learner? Are you a slow learner? Are you left brain oriented? Are you more rational, thinking about numbers and graphs, and do you want to verbalize things? Or are you more the creative type, the more intuitive type, or the more listen to emotions, to your gut feeling type? Do you listen to your instincts or your reflexes instead of just trying to look at everything in a rational way? So those three things are for me very important. When you have those three things nailed down for your athlete, left or right brained, fast or slow twitch, and your ability to handle stress, I think you already did, let me say, 60-70% of your profiling. And then from that, base the programs on those things. I wrote some things about profiling of athletes before, and it has to be done in a fast and simple way. We can use all kinds of complicated programs and technologies to figure it out exactly. That's not necessary. You have to make a gross estimation of how the athlete is functioning. You don't have to know what brand of car, what type of car, what year of car. But you have to know, am I driving a Hummer or am I driving a Volkswagen Beetle or am I driving a Ferrari? That's important to know. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's awesome. So you look at the right brain versus left brain. That's like a test, right? Like a written test.
Yeah, there's a written test for that. You can do it directly by EEG. You can use functional MRI, but that's outside beyond the scope of many coaches. But there's a written test, and also there's some other things that you can do. It's like looking at left-handed, right-handed, left-footed, right-footed, the dominance of your motor system. Are you left-eared or right-eared? Are you left-eyed or right-eyed? What is your most predominant eye? And also you can learn some things from that as well. But the best one is just, there are some questionnaires about that. There are some books about that, about left and right brain. And don't go too deep into that. Don't follow it. It's not the left brain is exactly left and the right brain. No. But just have an idea how this athlete functions.
Right, because obviously how they learn and how they do all that is going to dictate not just some programming things, but how you're cueing things.
Yeah.
And
so
go ahead.
No, I think it's important because the brain function in Holland, a big book was written by a professor called "We Are Our Brain." If you are our brain, why don't we think more about our brain functioning? We look at the muscle all the time, we look at the heart all the time, we look at many factors, but very few people look at the brain function, which basically determines all of your sports performance. Where does your visual sensory input come in? Where does motivation come from? Where does motor learning come from? Where does memory come from? Where does movement come from? Everything basically stems from the brain. So I think we should pay more attention to the brain function of the athlete without exaggeration, without going too deep or too specializing. But you should have an idea about that.
No, I think that's really fantastic. And I can say with certainty, I know of only one coach around here, a mutual friend of ours, who's actually been on this podcast twice already, who's ever talked about that, looking at that. And he talks about it with the utmost rave reviews. Now, he's obviously in a pretty unique situation up in Pittsburgh. Jeff is, with the kids that he works with. Would any of those three change when you're dealing with a team? Since, you have been involved with different clubs and different teams.
Yeah.
Do those three elements ever change, or is it always pressure, muscle fiber type, and learning?
Yeah.
Or like, if you were to say get a call from Ajax tomorrow, would those be the three things that you would want to start talking with them about their boys with, or would it be different?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because in a team, you're looking at the right person at the right place, doing the right things. And we know that the profiles are different for, let me say, in soccer, from a midfielder, a defensive player, or it's very clear, a goalkeeper, or how you call it, offensive player.
Yeah, striker.
He's fast, and he doesn't sprint that fast and that often, but when he sprints, he really sprints, and his endurance, that's good, but he's the fastest of all. The midfielder is just going back and forth, bowling back and forth, not that fast, but can cover a lot of mileage. So there's of course every position in a team has basically a different profile. And I know in the US, especially in American football and also in baseball, there's statistics of finding it out. But how do we really differentiate this in training? I think there's too little attention for differentiators in training. That's the first step, not as a team, but looking at the position of a team and the personal preferences of the athlete of learning should be taken into account as well. It doesn't matter if you're a defensive player or a midfielder, but if you learn faster by looking at graphs or looking at pictures, or you learn faster by just seeing people and doing it and experience it yourself, that's an important thing, because in elite sports, at least, we always look at the minimal margin of improvement. So those things are going to make a difference for sure in the long term. And you have to know if your player is explosive or not. Somebody might not be very explosive, so as a forward having to sprint, he might not do that well. And now you can do a lot of things, but you cannot turn a donkey into a racehorse yet.
Yeah.
Well, but you can make fast donkeys, but you can make faster racehorses, absolutely.
Yeah.
But in this case, you might look for somebody who is more explosive to start with. So you always has a hard start of somebody who is less explosive. You can compensate for that. You can correct for that. You can make a slow guy faster, but you can't make him really fast. So if you're already a fast and explosive guy, it's easy to work with him or with her.
Right.
So by making a team, you have to look at that profile as well, the personal preferences.
Well, and then early on, in one of our first episodes, someone talked about looking at it as what makes that athlete special too. It's staying with soccer or football. Like, there's obviously some guys that play up top who aren't very fast but can hold the ball, or aren't very fast but are just tall and strong and jump high and head the ball. They're usually called Germans, right? But
Yeah.
and they're pretty good. They win sometimes. So it's is it something where you think that those two may kind of be like intertwined? So like you talked about profiling the position, but let's say you and I play the same position. We're obviously very different people.
Yeah.
But maybe what I do for the team would be what allows us to be successful, and what you do for the team. So would you put them and try to make them more into the profile, or would you make Henk better at Henk and Jay better at Jay?
Yeah, the last one. Because this is the beauty of sports. There is very little generalization in sports. There's many ways that lead to Rome, and there's many different profiles leading to the same success. There's always things that you can compensate. If your technique isn't that well, you can compensate because you're very strong or very fast, even if your technique is not perfectly biomechanically. You should work on that, of course. Or maybe you're not that strong, you're not that fast, but you have a very good feel for the ball or insight in the game. Or you're mentally very strong, you never ever give up. So that's the beauty of sports. Many people can reach the top with completely different profiles. But they only get to that to the top because they listen to that profile and they develop that specific profile. So there's different ways to learn a movement. Some people are more verbal. You talk them to death, and they say, "Okay, coach, tell me again." Yes, now I get it. And some people have to see it, and they get it as well. They don't like to listen to you verbalizing everything and talk them to death. No, they don't get it. They have to see it. Now I understand. You've been talking for half an hour, and they didn't grab it, and now they see you. Oh yeah, okay, that's how it is. They understand. So you can learn in different ways. There's always different ways, but you have to find out the optimal way for each different athlete. So like I said, you get people with fast fibers, they can run fast, of course. People with a little bit less fast fibers or with more slow fibers, they also can run fast if they know how to do it, how to use the smaller amount of fast fiber, how to use them optimally, how to make them hypertrophy. There's ways to do that, and there's other factors involved as well. So yeah, I think it's not a static thing that if you don't fit the profile, then no, it's profiling to see where your athlete is. We know the demands of sports in the first place, and there's beautiful world-class example of high jumpers which are very short. Of course, you prefer a tall high jumper with a high center of gravity, but if he's short, you can have much more explosive or much better technique. So look at the profile of the athlete, and it will do half of the job, and build your program on that instead of building a program for everybody. For the general athlete, will apply to everybody. And for the average athlete, you will get average result, and that's it. And that's not what we're looking for. We're looking at the best result of every individual athlete. Squeeze out the best possible performance out of every different athlete. And some people will do better than others. That will always be a problem. But it is mainly because you don't look at the athlete. We give them all the same way. It's a one size fits all for all the athletes, and that's just not true. We know that.
Right. That's some awesome stuff. I want to try to move on to the next question because this
okay.
This one is something that we talked the last time we talked about a bit. And then starting our conversation before we started recording, we were talking a little about the ebbs and flows of things.
Yeah. So
keeping it positive, what are you optimistic about coming into the future when it comes to developing athletes?
Well, one thing you can be optimistic about, there will always be more athletes because the population of the planet is growing. So when there are more people, there will be more athletes and a bigger pool to fish from. That's why big countries like the US or like China or Russia will always have an advantage over smaller countries like Holland. So we don't have that much people. There are more people, more opportunities that you will run into a talent. There is lots of technical developments as well. I used to work almost with a mechanical stopwatch. We ran on cinder tracks. There was no high-tech equipment. Forget about internet or about video systems. If you have a video recorder or Super 8 movies, I mean, it was ridiculous. But so technical development is going to help us in the future. There is a risk technical development and basically it is, in former days, technology was there to help us. Technology was our slave, was our tool. But it seems more and more that we become slaves of technology. So you see people responding if their phone is beeping. You see a total response, people jumping out of their chair or becoming very uncomfortable because there's a phone beeping somewhere. So that means a little beep changes something in your behavior already. If that can change your behavior, don't ask me what the rest of all those stimuli will do to the human brain and human behavior. So we became slaves of technology, and that's something that we should be. And also many young coaches became slaves of their tools, of their equipment a little bit, believing that buying the latest equipment and the hottest technology and the nicest gadgets will automatically lead to a better performance. And this is just not true. And that's why we always, thank God, need coaches for it. Not only to buy the equipment. Most of the time we don't even pay for them, but that's somebody else doing that. But it's just to interpret the data. So make sure that what you derive the right conclusion for all the data we get to our tools. But more time you see also, well, a lot of tools for fools, toys for boys, instead of making wise use of the equipment that is available. So technology, new technologies, knowledge about biomedical sciences, about genes. Like I said, there's genetic testing right now, which is also part of this of the profile, and that's a neglected chapter right there. The most important thing is you are basically, for a large part, for the product of the genes of your parents. And that determines how the color of your eye, that determines how tall you are, that determines a lot of things. And most of the time we try to work on factors for which you might genetically not be suited. You have no genetic predisposition to say, look at my muscles here. Do you think these muscles are determined to become Arnold Schwarzenegger? I don't think so.
Oh, I argue against that. I think you could look like Arnold tomorrow.
Maybe he didn't try hard enough. That's true too. Maybe he didn't even want to be look like him. No, that's a lie. My hero. So you might be trying to work on things for which genes did not equip you very well. Now you can overcome that by training, but you have to keep this in mind, that you might not be that racehorse, you might be a donkey. That doesn't stop you from being a very fast donkey, but that's nice if you have to race against donkeys. But if you have to race against racehorses, then even the fast donkey is going to lose from the racehorses. And so we can derive a lot of information, especially about trainability, the ability to handle workload, about nutrition, about fiber type, and so on. About many things we can derive in a simple way, non-invasive, relatively cheap from genetic testing right now. So I think that's going to be, well, I'm positive that genes, not minding the fact that we only know maybe 1% of what is happening. But 1% is better than nothing, than ignoring the fact that we know already 1%. You say, okay, forget about 1%. I want to know 100%. I only start doing gene testing when we know 100%. Then you might have to wait for 50 more years or maybe 100 more years. So in our lifetime, we have to do whatever is available, and there's information available. So I started working with genetic testing, and yeah, this field will evolve very quickly. Will develop very quick in the coming decades.
And then how do you see genetic testing trickling down to the masses then, when it comes to training athletes?
Yeah, right now I use it mainly as a confirmation. Now what we do now is a lot of trial and error. We feed our athlete, or athletes feed themselves, mainly we don't feed them, but they feed themselves with stuff which might not be good for them, and they find out when the damage is done after years. They might have a gluten intolerance, they might have a lactose intolerance. All those things are mainly determined by your genes. Or the ability to handle toxins like caffeine or alcohol. Some people can drink a lot of alcohol and get up from that chair and walk away, and some people, they just drink 2 beers are on the floor. Now you can figure it out by trial and error.
Yeah.
You also have an idea from your genetic makeup by looking at it beforehand, instead of finding out by trial and error that things don't work. Now you can look at the tendency or the trend. Okay, I have this idea, but I see this genetically, this might not work. This person is just not suited for this kind of load, or for this kind of nutrition, or for this kind of training. So you can already skip a lot of trial and error, and you can save valuable time, I think, by at least having an idea what the athlete is, how the athlete is built, how his blueprint looks like, instead of building a house with some bricks and some mortar and some whatever. Instead of looking at the blueprint, and you have at least an idea how this house is going to look like in the future. You know how high the walls are, and how many bricks you need, and what kind of bricks you need. So you're basically looking at a blueprint, which is interesting.
Yeah, and that's just the swab.
Yeah.
And then, is there pre-test, post-test?
No, it's just you send it to the lab and you get your basically your genetic blueprint.
Right.
The
So
thing
do you
yeah.
track that? So then, like, I come to you, we're training for Rio, we do that first, and then do we do that in a couple months again, or is that just the starting point and we just roll from there?
Well, there's only one starting point. Your blueprint is your blueprint. It
Right.
doesn't. It changes very little over time, only by mutations or by. Well, if you spend a lot of time in the sun, some of your skin cells will pop and start to mutate and everything. So yeah, there is always a little bit of impact, but over your blueprint will not change. It's like a book of 400 years ago. Yes, the paper and the ink will fade. Yeah, absolutely true. But you can still able to read the original text in there. So your blueprint will basically stay the same. There's not much difference if you do it now. It's a one-time thing for sure.
Do you think that this will have an impact on athlete selection?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Now here's the clue. Because something like uh, speed or something like strength is determined by 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 different genes. So there might be 200 genes. So only when you have, and you'll never find somebody with, it's like a light switch you switch on or off, basically. And it will be very hard to find out one athlete which has all the 200 light switches on.
Yeah.
So you have those 200 light switches, all of them are on. They're always so we're already happy to, and only one of out of 20 athletes has this light switch switched on. No. Okay, so 1 out of 20 athletes, that's for the first switch only. And then the second switch, another 1 in 20 will have this light switch switched on. Let's say for speed or for fast fibers or whatever. That means 20 times 20, it's only 1 in 400 athletes already will have those two light switches switched on. And so you have 200 of them. So the chances that you will find an athlete like that, the perfect genetic athlete, it's very slim. But it doesn't really matter because it gives you more information. It just gives you more information. You know what light switches. Okay, we are not looking at certainties. We're looking at probability here.
Right.
Probability that you have an athlete. There's no certain things in sport. There's no certain things in life. There's no certainty in biology. So we look at probability here.
No, but that's neat because it's not expensive. It's extremely invasive.
No, exactly. It
It
has
would
to
just
be
it would just be
one.
dealing with a laboratory that would know what you're looking for.
Yeah, and basically you can also look at, let me say, what to do with baby is given this heel, prick in the heel to see
Yeah.
if they. Okay, but mainly in hospitals and in medicine, it's for looking for genetic diseases. They're specifically looking for genetic diseases like neuromuscular diseases or metabolic diseases. Well, that's as coaches, that's not our cup of tea. So most universities and hospitals laboratories are specialized in looking at what is the probability that you will get Alzheimer or you will get cardiovascular problems or that you will. Okay, stay away from that. That's not our business. We are coaches. We have to look at performance. We have to look at health indeed. And there's some overlap. For instance, the risk of injuries. There are some genes which are responsibility for the structure of your collagenous tissue. Well, if the collagenous tissue is not well developed and is a little bit weaker, then you will have all the time you have injuries and nobody knows where it really comes from. Well, it's genes. It's already well established for instance, the Achilles tendon and for some other things as well. We know which genes are related to that. So by looking at the genes, I can look at the probability. Now, the good thing is it doesn't say that you are going to be injured. If you have this gene and you sit in your chair and never get up, you will never get injured.
Right.
But if you have this gene, you're an athlete, then you know with this athlete you have to take a little bit more care of establishing a program and training loads and heavy loads and everything, all those things that give you in. For the athletes can take more risk, and for this athlete you have to be a little bit more careful. But now you have a kind of a warning sign that okay, maybe he cannot handle that workload like other people can. Instead of finding out that after they get injured.
It's great that you say it like that because that's a situation that I've run into of recent
Yeah,
with a lot of the kids and some of the people that I work with, where they look at these things and it's like, well, you probably shouldn't handle this today, or you might not want to do that today, or whatever. And then they go out and it's still the best performance of their life. The
yeah, yeah.
total exaggeration there, but you know what
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
getting at. But
yeah,
it's like what they don't understand is what we're saying is it's probably something you want to keep an eye on, or could lead to problems later,
yeah,
or there's the precursors
mhm,
for this boulder to start rolling down the hill.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you could be the 1 in 400 that you mentioned,
mm.
put your earbuds in, walk across train tracks, and get run over. Like there's nothing in your genes that says you're not going to get hit by a car
No,
or you're
no,
not going to get run over by a train. Like shit happens,
exactly,
you
exactly,
know.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah,
but I think people look at all of these, and I think that you said it great when you were talking about it's just data that's going to allow us to make better decisions and understand directions to take because of could
mm,
what we could be looking at. People look at all of these things in such a like they're deities. And back to our conversation before, I think that part of this generation too, what they have a hard time with is because everything's been given to them so quick and right away, and it's all right in their face,
yeah,
that they don't understand um, like probability almost.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
That you can do this, but you can do this now, but tomorrow you might have a problem. Or if we keep doing this, now you're going to start breaking down. Um, so no, that's really neat. And I think that the whole idea of looking at just those two factors,
Mhm.
you know, are there injury risks? Are they really good athletically, like
Yeah,
predisposed?
yeah,
Could really be like game changing stuff
yeah.
um, when it comes to just recruitment.
Yeah, it's like an evolution. It's not a revolution. Genetic revolution. Well, the fact that we could revel the human gene by Craig Venter in the beginning of this century was okay. Probably a revolution. It was the first time that something happened. And now there's an evolution. Evolution is going fast, and it has some use in sport. It's not going to be that everybody needs genetic testing and everybody is going to be a better athlete now. It's not like that. It always depends again, yes, on the coach, on the coach. What decision you're going to make based on that information. Where you see this, get the same information, we take other decisions depending on your experience, your culture, your education and your preferences as a coach. Even if we get the same information, so the secret will be the quality coach that makes the little bit better decisions than the other coach based on the same information.
Yeah.
So and that's why coaches' education is an important thing, and yeah, that's why I see one hand a positive trend. There's more information available all over the world
Oh yeah.
through the internet. I don't have to go to the library in let me say Los Angeles or New York to find a book that is not available in any university in Europe. I can find a book now at the internet. That's fine, but there's so much that people get lost. That's one thing. And strange enough, our perspective of time is changing. Our perspective of time also as coaches, but many new generation coaches changing. I'm reading books from 100 years ago, already did a long time ago when I was a young coach, to see, to learn from the old chaps. What mistake are they making? What advice are they giving you? Because these guys already had 20 years of experience as a coach, and I had not even 2 days experience as a coach. So what can I learn from them already to start with? Not getting into the same trap like they did, not making the same mistakes that they did. And number two, I'm looking in the future. I'm not looking at the athlete, what is the athlete going to do tomorrow or in the Olympics in Rio, but also looking at where will this athlete be in 4 years. Is there a chance that the athlete in 4 years in 2020 will go to the next Olympic Games? Okay. And then I also take care of the health of the athlete. Will this athlete be harmed or injured by my training or my ideas? Because there's a life after sports. It's nice you have to say, hey, Hank, great, I got this Olympic medal, or I got this world record, I ran this world record, but, where's your medal? Well, it's in here in my wheelchair. It's in a wheelchair. It's not very good. But it seems the time perspective of modern coaches is like more limited to now. What is now? They don't think about the long term, and they don't look back in the long term. They only look back. Everything is older than 5 years is old, or they don't even they ignore it. Even this. And that's what I see as a threat to the quality of the coaches.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it seems that, again, going back to the idea that you had earlier, the ebbs and flows of everything,
Yeah.
there's just some stuff that always works.
Yeah. Yeah. It worked already 3,000 years ago, like breathing techniques, like yoga or whatever. It worked 3,000 years ago, like acupuncture. It works, of course. It worked 3,000 years ago. If it wouldn't survive that time span.
Yeah.
It would be discarded after a couple of years if it wouldn't work.
Right.
So there's many things to learn from the past. If it worked then, it will pretty much work now. At least if we're talking about things like this. Yeah.
Completely. Henk, this has been absolutely fantastic. I can't thank you enough for taking the time out today to talk with us.
Okay.
And I guess we could take this moment, though, to announce you're coming back to the United States in July.
Yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
back on the docket for the 2016 seminar.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking forward already. I'm almost every week or almost at a daily base. I must admit, I'm looking forward to lecture at your seminar. Absolutely, it
Brilliant.
has
Well,
so much pleasure, and it's not only the seminar in itself, meeting you and going back to Richmond, but it's also the people that you invite. And I've been to seminars over past years from Canada, Australia, Europe, almost all over the world. But yeah, one reason or another, yours really stands out. It's not only the knowledge and the experience, the sharing with the coaches there, and the sharing with the other speakers, but it's also the whole atmosphere that that I really like. So I'm looking forward to that, Jay.
well, I
Absolutely.
can't wait to have you back stateside, buddy, and catch up so we don't have to talk through a computer. But I can't thank you enough for the time today, Hank. We'll be in touch really soon.
Okay,
Brilliant.
Jay. Thanks.
And a huge thanks again to Henk Kraaijenhof for taking his time out to sit and talk with us about these things. Absolutely full of information, tons of gems in that talk. Just the whole idea of the genetic testing to look at fiber typing, nutritional strategies, injury risk possibilities. I mean, that stuff is unbelievable. It's really really neat, and it's awesome to know that Hank is so far ahead of the curve and pushing all of us to become better coaches. And super excited to piggyback that announcement with Hank being the second presenter we are announcing for the 2016 seminar here in Richmond, Virginia, July 15th and 16th. I can't wait. As the lineup unfolds, guys, you'll be able to see why we are so excited and can't wait for July to get here. And as always, any comments, thoughts, questions, please post them below. Hank's definitely going to be back. You know, he's a great resource who's not afraid to answer questions and share information. So any questions, comments, thoughts, please leave them below. Shoot them at us on Twitter, put them on Facebook, and we'll get Hank answering those right away. And as always, guys, thank you for being part of the podcast and everything we do here at Central Virginia Sport Performance. We'll be back next week with another awesome guest.